Okay, so let's get right into it. When you look at South Korea, what do you see? You probably think of K-pop, amazing technology, incredible food, these gleaming cityscapes, and you'd be right. But if you scratch just below that super polished surface, you find a society that is running on pure, uncut pressure. We're talking staggering debt and a competition so fierce it feels less like a country and more like a high-stakes survival game. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack the deep paradoxes that make South Korea feel like a real-life Squid Game. And the first thing you'd notice right away is that this is a society built on image. It's this culture where how you look and the success you project is, well, it's everything. From the clothes you wear to the car you drive, that pressure to look perfect is just baked into the national DNA.
And I'm not just talking about fashion. Get this, South Korea has the highest rate of cosmetic surgery per capita in the entire world. It's so normalized that some estimates say 1 in 3 women in Seoul has had some kind of procedure. That just tells you everything you need to know about the immense pressure to fit a very specific ideal of beauty. But this obsession with the perfect outside, it's hiding a much darker story on the inside.
Because while the country is projecting all this wealth and glamour, the average household is drowning. Household debt is a jaw-dropping 100% of the country's GDP. To put that in perspective, that is way, way higher than the average for other developed nations. It's a system stretching family finances to the absolute breaking point.
So this is the big question, right? How can a society be so successful on the world stage, yet so deeply indebted at home? How can people be so focused on luxury and appearance when they're under this much financial stress? What on earth created this nation of crazy contradictions? Okay, let's break it down.
All right, first up, we've got to follow the money, because the whole paradox really starts with how people spend, or maybe more accurately, how they can't spend their money.
Now, even though it's a rich country, the amount of money people spend on everyday things is actually really low. So you might think, okay, they must be saving a ton, right? Nope. The savings rate is one of the lowest in East Asia. The truth is, most people's income is getting completely swallowed by just 2 things: paying back all that massive debt and funding the incredibly high cost of maintaining that perfect, gleaming exterior.
And this pattern of extremes, it goes way beyond just money. South Korea has the absolute highest suicide rate in the developed world, and at the exact same time, it has the lowest birth rate on the entire planet. It's a country with almost no middle ground. You look at any major social metric, and it's either number 1 or dead last. There is no average, no comfortable middle.
So, to really understand how a whole society gets to this point, you have to rewind the clock, because the pressures of today were really forged in the fire of yesterday. We're talking about an economic boom that was born out of pure, desperate survival.
We've all heard the term the miracle on the Han River, right? This incredible story of South Korea's economic leap. But calling it a miracle feels a little too soft. This wasn't magic. After the Korean War, the country was literally one of the poorest on earth. It had nothing. This was an act of national survival, a top-down, almost military-style push to either industrialize or just cease to exist.
And that long, painful history of survival leaves a deep psychological mark. Think about it. You're a small nation, surrounded by giants like China and Japan. Over centuries, you developed this worldview called Sadae-jui. It's basically the idea that to survive, you have to align with a bigger, more powerful nation. This creates this deep-seated national insecurity, this feeling that you constantly have to prove you deserve your spot on the world stage.
And that connects directly to what we see today. It's like a person who grew up with nothing and then suddenly gets rich. They might feel this desperate need to show it off, to buy the fancy car, the designer clothes, to prove to everyone and to themselves that they've finally made it. That deep national insecurity gets projected outward as an obsession with image, with status, with external validation. So this desperate race for national success built a really unique economic system, one that's dominated by just a handful of massive companies, who, today, basically set the rules of the game for everybody else. And of course, I'm talking about the famous Chaebols. The power these family-owned conglomerates have is, well, it's hard to even wrap your head around. Companies like Samsung, Hyundai, LG, they aren't just big companies in Korea. They basically are the Korean economy. The top 10 Chaebols alone generate well over 60% of the country's entire GDP. But here is the massive, fundamental problem that defines this whole game. While the Chaebols create almost 2/3 of the nation's wealth, they provide less than 10% of the jobs.
Think about that. All that wealth, all that power, but very, very few positions. This creates an incredibly warped economic landscape.
So what you end up with is a system where all the money, all the prestige, all the good jobs are concentrated behind this one tiny little door. And life becomes this frantic, brutal, winner-take-all race to be one of the few who can squeeze through it. There's no plan B. There's no middle path. You either become an elite working for a Chaebol, or, in the eyes of society, you're a failure. And that all-or-nothing mindset, it starts in kindergarten.
And this brutal competition, this national obsession with getting through that one tiny door, well, it comes at a truly devastating human cost.
That pressure gets funneled right down into the school system. A student's entire childhood is basically preparation for one single exam that decides their entire future. South Korean high schoolers study, on average, over 13 hours a day. That is more than any other developed nation on Earth. Childhood isn't a time for play. It's a grueling training camp for the game ahead.
And then, tragically, you look at the other end of life, and the picture is just as bleak. The very generation that sacrificed everything to build that Han River miracle, they've been completely left behind. The social safety net was built too little, too late. Today, South Korea's elderly poverty rate is nearly 40%. That's almost triple the average for other rich countries. They won the war for national survival, only to lose the peace in their own old age.
So if you're an ordinary person, where can you even put your money to grow it? Well, probably not the stock market. It's so dominated by the Chaebols and has so many issues that for most people, it feels less like an investment and more like a casino. So what happens? Over half of all household wealth gets poured into one thing, real estate, especially in the hyper-expensive capital, Seoul. This just jacks up prices, fuels even more debt, and traps people in this endless cycle of working just to pay for a place to live.
So when you put all of these pieces together, the history, the Chaebols, the pressure, you arrive at the final tragic paradox of South Korea. It's the story of unbelievable national success that was built on a foundation of individual sacrifice and suffering.
And from a really cold strategic point of view, this brutal system actually makes it kind of tragic sense. I mean, think about it. If your country has absolutely nothing, no natural resources, no capital, just your people, what's your strategy? You turn your people into the ultimate resource. You push education and competition to their absolute limits to create a hyper-productive workforce that can simply outwork and outcompete everyone else. And you know what? It worked, but the cost was absolutely immense.
What you're left with today is this really unique and frankly punishing cultural hybrid. It takes the most intense parts of traditional Confucianism, the pressure to sacrifice for the group, the rigid social hierarchies, and it fuses them with the most ruthless part of modern capitalism, the winner-take-all mindset. It's like a high-pressure cooker with absolutely no release valve. And that brings us to the final, really haunting question here. South Korea is a rich, powerful, developed nation now. The fight for basic survival is over. It won. But what happens when the mindset that you forged in that desperate battle never actually goes away? What happens when your entire society is still built for a war that ended decades ago?
Well, the answer seems to be that the game just keeps going. The external threat is gone, but that relentless, high-stakes competition for survival is still there. Only now it's turned inward, pitting its own people against each other. The game never actually stopped. It just changed its name.